Captain Zarathek's 3 eyes darted frantically across the bridge displays of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge. The sleek Valanian ship, once a symbol of peaceful exploration and interspecies cooperation, now shuddered under the relentless bombardment from the Korthak war fleet. Crimson warning lights bathed the bridge in an ominous glow, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the recycled air. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Lieutenant Vexori, his normally melodic voice strained with terror. The young Valanian's crystalline skin had lost its usual azure shimmer, now dulled to a sickly gray that betrayed his fear. Atmospheric containment fields are holding, but barely. Zarathek's mandibles clicked in frustration as another volley of plasma fire rocked their ship. Through the main view screen, the menacing silhouettes of Korthak destroyers loomed like hungry predators, their angular hulls bristling with weapons designed for one purpose: complete annihilation. The Korthak had been the terror of this sector for over a century, their empire built upon the bones of conquered civilizations. "Communications, have you managed to break through their jamming field?" Zarathek demanded, her elongated fingers dancing across her command console with desperate precision. Communications Officer Thanel shook his head, his 4 arms working frantically at his station. "The Korthak interference is too strong, Captain. I cannot reach the Galactic Council or any nearby patrol vessels. We are completely cut off." The bridge trembled again as another direct hit found its mark. Sparks cascaded from overhead conduits, and Zarathek could hear the distant wail of emergency klaxons echoing through the ship's corridors. They were dying by degrees, and she knew it. The Harmony's Edge had been on a routine diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim territories when the Korthak ambush had caught them completely off guard. "Captain," Vexori called out, his voice barely audible above the chaos. "I'm detecting massive energy buildups in their forward weapons arrays. They're preparing for a final bombardment." Zarathek closed her eyes for a moment, her mind racing through their dwindling options. The Valanian people were peaceful by nature, their entire civilization built around harmony and cooperation. They had no weapons capable of fighting off this Korthak assault, no military protocols beyond basic defensive measures. Their ship had been designed for exploration and diplomacy, not warfare. "There is one possibility," Thanel said suddenly, his voice cutting through the despair that had settled over the bridge. "I could attempt to send a distress signal on the old emergency frequencies, the ones established during the first contact protocols." "To whom?" Zarathek asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "The humans," Thanel replied, his tone carrying a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Their space is the closest to our current position, perhaps 20 light-years at most." A heavy silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the continuous sounds of their dying ship. Every member of the crew knew about humanity, though none had ever encountered them directly. The humans were legendary throughout the galaxy, spoken of in hushed whispers in the deepest corners of space stations and trading posts. They were the species that other races whispered about when they thought no one else was listening. Humanity had emerged from a world so hostile that most galactic species considered it barely habitable. Earth, the 3rd planet in the Sol system, was a death world of the highest classification. Its gravity was crushing, its atmosphere corrosive, its weather patterns violent beyond imagination. The fact that any intelligent life had evolved there at all was considered a miracle by xenobiologists throughout the galaxy. But humanity had done more than merely survive their hellish homeworld. They had thrived, conquered it, and then reached for the stars with a determination that bordered on insanity. When they had finally achieved faster-than-light travel and made contact with the galactic community, their reputation had preceded them. Stories of human resilience, human stubbornness, and, most terrifyingly, human warfare had spread like wildfire through the established civilizations. "The humans are," Vexori began, then trailed off, unable to find the words. "Dangerous," finished another crew member from across the bridge. "They say humans can survive in environments that would kill most of us within minutes. They say human military doctrine is based on principles that other species consider war crimes. They also say," Zarathek added quietly, "that humans have never abandoned an ally in need, that they consider distress calls sacred obligations." The ship lurched violently as the Korthak weapons found their mark again. Systems throughout the bridge began failing in cascading waves of destruction. Emergency power kicked in, reducing their lighting to emergency strips that cast eerie shadows across the walls. "Captain," the engineer's voice crackled through the failing communications system. "Main power coupling is destabilized. We have perhaps 10 minutes before complete system failure." Zarathek made her decision. "Fainel, send the distress signal. Use the old emergency protocols, full spectrum broadcast, maximum power." "But, Captain," Vexori protested, "if the humans respond, they might demand payment, territorial concessions, or worse. Their reputation for aggression is well documented. Would you rather die with dignity or live to potentially regret our choices?" Zarathek snapped back. "Send the signal." Fainel's forearms moved with practiced efficiency across his console. "Composing message now, Captain. Standard distress protocols, our location, nature of the threat, and should I mention that we are facing Korthak forces?" "Yes," Zarathek replied without hesitation. "Let them know exactly what they would be facing." The communications officer worked in silence for several moments, his brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, he looked up. "Message ready, Captain. Transmitting on all human emergency frequencies." "Do it." The signal shot out from the Harmony's edge at faster-than-light speeds, a desperate cry for help racing through the void toward human space. The message was simple but comprehensive. A diplomatic vessel under attack by Korthak forces, crew of 47 souls aboard, requesting immediate assistance from any vessels in range. "Signal away, Captain," Fainel reported. "Now we can only wait." "How long for a response?" Vexori asked. "If there are any human vessels within 20 light-years of our position, we should hear back within the hour," Fainel calculated. "But that assumes they're willing to help, and that they have ships capable of reaching us in time." Another massive impact rocked the ship, this one strong enough to throw several crew members from their stations. Zarathek steadied herself against her command chair, noting with growing alarm that their main view screen was now flickering intermittently. "Structural integrity down to 37%, the engineer reported. "The Korthak are targeting our support struts. They're trying to break our back." Through the damaged view screen, Zarathek could see the lead Korthak destroyer moving closer, its weapon ports glowing with charged energy. The Korthak were reptilian humanoids, their civilization built upon conquest and domination. They took no prisoners, left no survivors, and considered mercy a weakness to be exploited. If they boarded the Harmony's edge, death would be a mercy compared to what would follow. "Captain," Fainel called out suddenly, his voice tight with excitement. "I'm receiving a transmission on the human emergency frequency." Every head on the bridge turned toward the communication station. The message that came through was brief, transmitted in accented but understandable galactic standard. "Valanian vessel Harmony's edge. This is the human destroyer Retribution. We have received your distress call and are en route to your position. Estimated arrival time 18 minutes. Hold fast." The message was followed by what sounded like human voices speaking in their native language, rapid-fire conversations filled with terms that the universal translator couldn't parse. Zarathek caught fragments. "Battle stations, maximum burn, hostile contact confirmed." "One ship?" Vexori asked, his voice hollow with despair. "One human destroyer against a Korthak battle group." "It's more than we had 5 minutes ago," Zarathek replied, though privately she shared his concern. The Korthak force consisted of 3 heavy destroyers and a command cruiser, enough firepower to level a small moon. What could one human ship, even a military vessel, possibly do against such odds? "Captain," the tactical officer reported, "the Korthak have detected our transmission. They're increasing their rate of fire. I think they want to finish us before help arrives." The bombardment intensified, each hit bringing them closer to complete destruction. Emergency force fields flickered into existence to contain atmosphere as hull breaches multiplied throughout the ship. The bridge itself shuddered under the assault, and Zarathek realized with growing dread that they might not survive the next 18 minutes. "All hands," she announced over the ship's failing intercom system. "This is the captain. Prepare for possible evacuation. Emergency protocols are now in effect." As if sensing her despair, another message crackled through the communications system. Valanian vessel, this is Retribution Actual. We're tracking your deteriorating condition. We will reach you in time. Humans don't leave people behind. The simple statement, delivered with absolute confidence, sent a chill through the bridge. There was something in the human commander's voice, a certainty that bordered on the supernatural. It was as if the concept of failure simply didn't exist in human vocabulary. New contacts on long-range sensors, Thanel announced. Human signatures, approaching at maximum velocity. Wait, that can't be right. What is it? Zarathek demanded. Captain, I'm reading not one, but multiple human vessels. At least 6 ships, possibly more. They're coming in fast, very fast. Through the static of their failing view screen, new points of light appeared at the edge of sensor range. The human ships were still too distant to see clearly, but their approach vector was unmistakable. They were coming straight for the Korthak formation, and they weren't slowing down. The lead Korthak commander apparently noticed the approaching human ships as well. The bombardment of the Harmony's edge suddenly ceased as the Korthak vessels began repositioning themselves to face this new threat. They're forming a defensive perimeter, Vexori observed. The Korthak are actually concerned about 6 human ships. The humans must have impressive military technology, someone murmured from across the bridge. Zarathek wasn't so sure it was just about technology. Throughout the galaxy, there were stories about human military doctrine that other species found difficult to believe. Humans, it was said, didn't just fight to win. They fought to ensure their enemies never wanted to fight them again. Their concept of proportional response was apparently non-existent. Incoming transmission from the human fleet, Thanel announced. This time, the voice that came through the speakers was different, deeper, and carrying an edge that made Zarathek's skin crawl with instinctive recognition of an apex predator. Korthak vessels. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Force. You are attacking a vessel under diplomatic immunity. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The response from the Korthak was swift and predictable. Human fleet. This is War Commander Throcktal. You have no authority in this sector. Withdraw or share the fate of these weaklings. The silence that followed stretched for what felt like an eternity. When the human admiral's voice returned, it carried a tone that Zarathek had never heard before, cold and implacable as the void itself. Korthak War Commander, you have made a grave mistake. You fired on beings who called for help. You threatened innocence. You have awakened something that should have stayed sleeping. Admiral, Thanel whispered urgently. The human ships are breaking formation. They're charging directly at the Korthak line. Through their damaged sensors, the crew of the Harmony's Edge watched in stunned silence as the human fleet abandoned all pretense of caution. 6 human destroyers accelerated toward the larger Korthak force with what could only be described as reckless abandon. It was a tactic that defied all conventional military wisdom. Are they insane? Vexori breathed. As if in answer to his question, Admiral Chin's voice crackled over the communications once more, this time broadcasting on all frequencies. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. We have 47 souls aboard that Valanian ship counting on us. I don't care how many Korthak vessels are out there. I don't care about the odds. Deathworlders don't leave people to die. All ships, weapons free. Show them why they should fear the dark between stars. The human ships surged forward, and Zarathek realized with growing amazement that she was about to witness something that would be talked about in galactic military academies for generations to come. The humans weren't just coming to rescue them. They were coming to deliver a message written in fire and fury across the void. The Korthak War Commander's confident demeanor seemed to waver as human weapons signatures blazed to life across his sensors. Whatever the reptilian commander had expected from the humans, it clearly wasn't this level of aggressive response to a simple distress call. Distance to human fleet? Zarathek asked. 12 minutes, and closing fast, Thanel replied. Captain, their approach speed is beyond anything I've ever seen from ships of that size. They're pushing their engines well beyond safe operating parameters. Because they know we're dying, Zarathek murmured, understanding flooding through her. They're risking their own ships to reach us in time. As the human fleet closed distance with the Korthak formation, One thought echoed through every mind on the bridge of the Harmony's edge. They had called for help, and the Deathworlder Armada had answered with fury incarnate. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Retribution, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the tactical display show the Korthak formation growing larger with each passing second. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the efficient precision that came from years of training and countless combat simulations. But this wasn't a simulation, and the 47 Valanian souls hanging in the balance made every decision carry the weight of life and death. Admiral, Commander Torres reported from the tactical station. Korthak formation is holding position. 3 destroyers and 1 heavy cruiser, all with full weapon loads. They're not running. Chin's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Good. I was hoping they'd be stupid enough to stand and fight. Lieutenant Kumar, the ship's communications officer, looked up from his station with concern written across his features. Admiral, should we attempt diplomatic contact? Try to negotiate the Valanian ship's release. Negotiate. Chin turned to face her communications officer, and Kumar instinctively took a step back from the cold fury in her eyes. Lieutenant, those Korthak bastards opened fire on a diplomatic vessel flying under galactic immunity. They attacked beings who were doing nothing more threatening than flying through open space. The time for negotiation ended the moment they decided innocent lives were acceptable casualties. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems and the steady updates from the various stations. Chin walked to the main view screen, where the distant lights of the Korthak ships were now visible as more than mere dots on the tactical display. Besides, she continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the bridge, the galaxy needs to remember something that seems to have been forgotten. Humans don't negotiate with pirates and murderers. We eliminate them. Admiral, the helmsman called out, we're at maximum safe velocity for combat approach. Should I reduce speed? Negative. Increase to maximum emergency speed. All ships are to match our approach vector. Ma'am, Commander Torres interjected, that will put significant stress on our engines and structural integrity systems. Chin turned back to her tactical officer, and Torres saw something in her commander's eyes that he'd only witnessed once before, during the Proxima Centauri incident when Korthak raiders had attacked a human colony ship. It was the look of someone who had moved beyond anger into something far more dangerous. Commander Torres, there are 47 civilians aboard that Valanian ship who are going to die if we don't reach them in time. I don't give a damn about stress on our engines. Push everything to redline if you have to, but get us there before those murdering reptiles finish what they started. Yes, Admiral, Torres replied, then turned to his console and began issuing orders to the engineering section. Across the small human fleet, similar conversations were taking place on the bridges of 5 other destroyers. Captain Maria Santos aboard the Vengeance was arguing with her chief engineer about plasma conduit stress tolerances. Captain James Mitchell on the Fury was overriding his ship's safety protocols to squeeze every possible bit of acceleration from his engines. Throughout the flotilla, human crews were pushing their ships beyond safe operating limits for one simple reason. People were in danger, and humans didn't abandon people in danger. Incoming transmission from the Korthak command ship, Kumar announced. Put it through. The voice that came over the speakers was harsh and guttural, speaking galactic standard with the thick accent of the Korthak warrior caste. Human Admiral, this is War Commander Throcktow of the Korthak 3rd Fleet. You approach our rightful combat zone without authorization. Turn your ships around and depart, or we will consider you hostile combatants. Chin walked slowly back to her command chair, her movements deliberate and controlled. Every person on the bridge watched her, waiting to see how their admiral would respond to what amounted to a direct threat. Kumar, open a channel. Full spectrum broadcast. Make sure every ship in the system can hear this. Channel open, Admiral. Chin's voice, when she spoke, was calm and measured, but it carried an undertone that made even her own crew members feel a chill of primitive fear. War Commander Throcktow, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Force. You have attacked a diplomatic vessel under galactic protection. You have endangered innocent civilian lives. You have threatened to fire upon human military vessels responding to a legitimate distress call. I want you to understand something very clearly. You are not dealing with the soft, civilized species that populate most of this galaxy. You are dealing with humans. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We learned to survive by being more dangerous than everything else on our planet. Today, you're going to learn why the rest of the galaxy whispers our name in dark corners of space stations. The transmission ended with a sharp click, and Chin settled into her command chair with the satisfied expression of someone who had just delivered a promise rather than a threat. Admiral, Commander Torres reported, Korthak vessels are powering weapons and moving to intercept formation. They're not backing down. I didn't expect them to. The Korthak only understand strength, and they haven't seen real strength yet. All ships, prepare for engagement. Target priorities are as follows. First, disable any vessel still firing on the Valanian ship. Second, eliminate Korthak command and control capabilities. Third, ensure that any surviving Korthak vessels are in no condition to threaten anyone else ever again. Admiral, Lieutenant Kumar said hesitantly, those targeting priorities go well beyond standard engagement protocols. We're supposed to accept surrender and provide aid to disabled enemy vessels. Chin's laugh was without humor. Lieutenant, when you attack a vessel flying diplomatic immunity, you forfeit any right to mercy. When you threaten innocent civilians, you cross a line that can't be uncrossed. And when you decide to stand and fight against a human rescue fleet instead of running like any sane being would do, you sign your own death warrant. The range continued to close between the two fleets. On the tactical display, the Korthak ships had formed a defensive wall between the humans and the crippled Valanian vessel. It was a textbook formation designed to maximize overlapping fields of fire while protecting their flanks from attack. Time to engagement range, Chin asked. For minutes, 30 seconds, Torres replied. Admiral, I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from the Korthak vessels. They appear to be charging some kind of heavy weaponry. Acknowledged. All ships, evasive maneuvers authorized once we enter combat range. Remember, we're not here to have a fair fight with these reptiles. We're here to rescue civilians and teach the galaxy a lesson about what happens when you threaten innocence. On the bridge of the Korthak command ship, War Commander Throcktal studied the approaching human vessels with growing unease. The humans were coming directly at his formation without any apparent concern for the superior firepower of his fleet. Either they were incredibly stupid, or they knew something he didn't. Subcommander, he called to his tactical officer. Analysis of human fleet composition. War Commander, we face 6 human destroyers. Our intelligence indicates that human military technology is roughly equivalent to our own, perhaps slightly inferior in weapons yield, but superior in defensive systems. However, the tactical situation favors us significantly. We have them outnumbered in total tonnage, and we hold the high ground position. Throcktal nodded, but his unease persisted. The Korthak had tangled with humans before, but never in such circumstances. Every previous encounter had involved border disputes or trade conflicts where both sides had something to lose. This was different. The humans were responding to what they clearly saw as an attack on innocence, and Korthak intelligence files were frustratingly vague about how humans behaved under such circumstances. Subcommander, what do our files say about human military doctrine when civilian lives are at stake? The tactical officer's scales rippled with uncertainty. War Commander, the intelligence files contain conflicting reports. Some sources suggest that humans become more cautious when civilians are involved, seeking to minimize casualties. Other reports indicate the opposite, that threats to non-combatants trigger what humans call berserker protocols, where normal tactical considerations are abandoned in favor of overwhelming aggression. Which do you believe? War Commander, I. The subcommander paused, studying his displays more carefully. Sir, the human fleet is not following standard engagement protocols. Their approach vector and speed suggest they intend to charge directly through our defensive formation. This is tactically suicidal unless they have capabilities we are unaware of. Throcktal's unease crystallized into genuine concern. The Korthak were a warrior species, their entire culture built around military conquest and battlefield dominance. They understood aggression and respected strength. But What the humans were doing wasn't aggressive, it was something else entirely. It was the behavior of beings who had moved beyond calculating risks and rewards and entered a state of mind where only one outcome was acceptable: total victory, regardless of cost. All vessels, he commanded, prepare for engagement. Target the lead human ship. If we can destroy their command vessel, the others may withdraw. War Commander, his communications officer reported, we're receiving additional transmissions from the human fleet. They appear to be coordinating their attack. Can you decode their tactical communications? Negative, sir. They're using heavily encrypted channels and what appears to be coded language. However, I am detecting something unusual in their transmissions. Explain. Sir, the human voices, they sound eager. Excited, even. It's as if they're looking forward to the engagement. Throktal's blood ran cold. In all his years of warfare, he had learned to recognize the difference between beings who fought because they had to and beings who fought because they wanted to. The Korthak fell into the latter category. They were a species that thrived on combat and conquest. But the humans sounded like something else entirely. They sounded like beings who had found their natural element. Time to engagement range, he demanded. 2 minutes, 40 seconds, War Commander. On the Retribution, Admiral Chun was finalizing her battle plan with ruthless efficiency. The human fleet had spread into a modified wedge formation, with the Retribution taking point and the other 5 destroyers arranged to provide maximum coverage and firepower concentration. Admiral, Commander Torres reported, all ships report ready for combat. Weapons are charged and targeting solutions are locked. Excellent. All ships, listen carefully. We're going to hit them hard and fast. The Vengeance and Fury will take the Korthak destroyers on the flanks. Thunder and Lightning will concentrate on the center destroyer. Retribution and Warhammer will deal with their command cruiser. Remember, we're not just fighting for the Valanians aboard that diplomatic ship. We're fighting to send a message to every pirate, raider, and would-be conqueror in this sector of the galaxy. Admiral, Lieutenant Kumar called out. Incoming transmission from the crippled Valanian vessel. Put them through. The voice that came through the speakers was weak and filled with static, but unmistakably grateful. Admiral Chun, this is Captain Zarathek of the Harmony's Edge. We cannot express our gratitude for your response to our distress call. Please know that whatever happens in the next few minutes, you have already done more for us than we had any right to expect. Chen's expression softened for just a moment. Captain Zarathek, you sent out a call for help. And help is exactly what you're going to get. Hold your ship together for just a few more minutes. We're almost there. We will try, Admiral. But, please, do not risk your ships unnecessarily for our sake. We are only 47 souls. Your fleet represents thousands of human lives. Captain, Chun replied, her voice carrying absolute conviction. In human space, we have a saying, no one left behind. It doesn't matter if it's one person or 47 or 407. When someone calls for help, we answer. Period. The transmission ended, and Chun turned back to the tactical display. The Korthak formation was now clearly visible, their ships arranged in a defensive position that would normally be considered impregnable. But Chun had no intention of playing by normal rules. All ships, she announced over the fleet communication channel, final approach. Remember your training, trust your shipmates, and show these Korthak bastards why humans don't make empty threats. Weapons free in 60 seconds. Across the human fleet, crews made their final preparations for battle. In the engineering sections, chief engineers pushed their reactors to maximum output. In the weapons bays, gunners made last-minute calibrations to their targeting systems. On the bridges, captains reviewed their tactical assignments and prepared to engage an enemy that had made the fatal mistake of threatening innocent civilians while humans were within range to respond. The two fleets closed the final distance separating them, and the darkness of space prepared to illuminate with the fury of human vengeance. Point 7. The first exchange of fire between the human and Korthak fleets lit up the void with the terrible beauty of modern space warfare. Plasma bolts traced brilliant arcs across the darkness, while particle beams lanced out with surgical precision. The initial salvo came from the Korthak formation, their heavy weapons targeting the lead human destroyer with concentrated firepower that should have been enough to cripple any ship caught in the crossfire. Should have been. Admiral Chun gripped the arms of her command chair as the Retribution shuddered under the impact of multiple direct hits. Around her, the bridge lighting flickered as power conduits rerouted to compensate for battle damage. But when the weapons fire cleared, her ship was still there, still advancing, and very much still in the fight. Damage report, she demanded. Forward shields down to 68%, Commander Torres called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Minor damage to the forward sensor array, but all primary systems remain operational. Admiral, their weapons are powerful, but our defensive systems are holding. Excellent. Return fire, all ships. Show them what human weapons can do when we're properly motivated. The human fleet's response was immediate and devastating. 6 destroyers fired as one, their combined firepower focused with precision that spoke of countless hours of training and coordination. The rightmost Korthak destroyer, caught in the crossfire from the Vengeance and Fury, simply vanished in a brilliant explosion that lit up the surrounding space like a miniature star. On the bridge of the Korthak command ship, War Commander Throcktal stared at his tactical display in shock. One of his destroyers had been completely eliminated in the first exchange. That shouldn't have been possible against a force of merely 6 human ships. Subcommander, he roared. How did they generate that much concentrated firepower? War Commander, the human ships appear to be using some form of network targeting system. They're not fighting as individual vessels. They're fighting as a single coordinated entity. Their weapons fire was perfectly synchronized to overwhelm the Bloodfang's defensive systems. Throcktal's tactical mind raced as he processed this information. Networked fleet operations were not unknown among the galaxy's military forces, but the level of coordination the humans had just displayed was beyond anything in Korthak combat doctrine. It suggested a level of trust and communication between ship crews that bordered on the supernatural. All ships, adjust formation. Present minimum target profile to enemy vessels. Concentrate fire on the human flagship. The remaining 3 Korthak ships began to maneuver, their massive forms wheeling through space like predatory creatures seeking the optimal angle of attack. But, as they moved, they discovered that the human fleet was not simply charging forward in a straight line. Each human destroyer was following a complex evasive pattern that somehow managed to maintain formation integrity while making targeting solutions nearly impossible to achieve. War Commander, the tactical officer reported with growing alarm. The human ships are moving in patterns that appear random but maintain perfect coordination. Our targeting computers cannot establish reliable firing solutions. Manual targeting, Throcktal snarled. These humans may be clever, but they cannot avoid our weapons indefinitely. But even as he spoke, the human fleet was demonstrating just how wrong he was. Admiral Chun had spent years studying every recorded engagement between human forces and other galactic species. She had identified the primary weakness in most alien military doctrine. They fought like individuals or loose collectives, each ship operating with significant autonomy. Humans fought as a pack, a coordinated organism where every unit knew exactly what every other unit was doing at all times. Admiral, Commander Torres announced, the Thunder and Lightning are in position to engage the Center Korthak destroyer. Warhammer is moving to support our attack on the command cruiser. Chin studied the tactical display with the intense focus of a predator stalking prey. The Korthak ships were powerful and well-armed, but they were fighting according to predictable patterns. Worse, they were fighting defensively, trying to protect their formation rather than pressing their apparent numerical advantage. Signal to all ships, she commanded. Execute Battle Plan Omega. Time to show these reptiles what happens when you threaten innocent civilians in human space. Battle Plan Omega was something that existed only in the darkest corners of human military planning. It was the protocol for situations where normal rules of engagement were suspended in favor of what human strategists coldly referred to as total elimination of threat capacity. It meant that taking prisoners was optional, that disabled enemy vessels were considered legitimate targets until completely destroyed, and that the primary objective was not victory, but annihilation. Across the human fleet, captains received their new orders with grim satisfaction. Captain Santos aboard the Vengeance was the first to acknowledge, "Retribution, this is Vengeance. We copy Battle Plan Omega. Time to remind the galaxy why our species survived natural selection on a death world." The change in human tactics was immediately apparent. Where before they had been methodical and controlled, now they became something that defied conventional military logic. The Thunder and Lightning performed a maneuver that should have been impossible for ships of their size, using their combined gravity wells to slingshot around each other and approach the central Korthak destroyer from two different vectors simultaneously. The Korthak commander aboard the targeted ship had perhaps 3 seconds to realize what was happening before both human destroyers opened fire at point-blank range. The alien vessel, caught between two devastating broadsides, broke apart like a toy in the hands of an angry child. Debris scattered across space, some pieces large enough to register on sensors as they tumbled away from the explosion. "By the ancestors," breathed the Korthak sub-commander aboard the command ship. How did they coordinate such a maneuver? The spatial calculations alone should have taken minutes to compute. War Commander Throktal was beginning to understand that he had made a catastrophic error in judgment. The humans weren't just another military force. They were something unprecedented in galactic warfare. They fought with a combination of technological sophistication and primal savagery that his tactical training had never prepared him to face. All remaining ships, "Fall back to defensive positions around the Valanian vessel," he ordered. "Use their ship as a shield. The humans will not risk hitting the beings they came to rescue." It was a desperation move, and every Korthak on the bridge knew it. But it was also tactically sound, or would have been against any other species in the galaxy. The humans, however, were not any other species. Admiral Chun watched the Korthak maneuver with cold calculation. They're trying to use the Harmony's edge as a human shield. Cowardly, but potentially effective. "Orders, Admiral?" Commander Torres asked. Chin's smile was absolutely predatory. "Signal the Valanian ship. Tell them to prepare for emergency maneuvers. We're going to thread the needle. Ma'am, the clearances between our ships and the Valanian vessel will be measured in meters. One miscalculation could result in catastrophic collision." "Commander Torres, have you ever heard the phrase 'hold my beer' and 'watch this'?" "No, Admiral. It's an ancient human expression that roughly translates to, 'I'm about to do something that looks impossible, but which I'm completely confident I can accomplish.' Signal all ships. We're going to perform precision targeting while conducting close support maneuvers around a damaged civilian vessel. If anyone has a problem with that level of complexity, they're flying with the wrong species." The response from the human fleet was immediate and enthusiastic. Captain Mitchell aboard the Fury was the first to respond. "Admiral, this is Fury. We've been looking forward to showing off our precision flying. The Korthak picked the wrong day to threaten civilians. What happened next would be analyzed in military academies throughout the galaxy for generations to come." The human fleet approached the cluster of ships around the Harmony's edge with a level of precision that bordered on the supernatural. Each destroyer began flying intricate patterns around the damaged Valanian ship, their courses calculated to provide clear firing solutions on the Korthak vessels while avoiding any possibility of hitting their intended rescue target. Captain Zarathek, watching from the bridge of the Harmony's edge, could only stare in amazement as human destroyers flew past her ship with clearances that couldn't have been more than a few dozen meters. The precision required for such maneuvers while engaging in active combat was beyond anything she had ever imagined possible. "Captain," her tactical officer reported in awed tones, "the humans are maintaining target locks on the Korthak ships while performing evasive maneuvers that would challenge a fighter pilot. How are they managing such precision with vessels of that size?" "I don't know," Zarathek admitted. "But I'm grateful they're on our side." The remaining Korthak ships found themselves in an impossible position. The humans were engaging them from multiple angles simultaneously, their weapons fire coming from vectors that changed constantly as the human destroyers wove through the debris field around the diplomatic vessel. Worse, every attempt to return fire risked hitting the Valanian ship they were supposedly using as protection. "War Commander," the tactical officer reported with despair in his voice, "we cannot achieve reliable firing solutions. The humans are using the damaged vessel as a navigation reference point while denying us the same advantage. They're flying attack patterns around that ship like it was a fixed obstacle course. Throktal realized with growing horror that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic military history. The humans weren't just rescuing the Valanian ship. They were using it as the centerpiece of a tactical maneuver that demonstrated absolute confidence in their piloting and gunnery skills. They were showing off, and they were doing it while destroying his fleet piece by piece. The end, when it came, was almost anticlimactic. The Retribution and Warhammer, working in perfect coordination, positioned themselves on opposite sides of the Korthak command cruiser and opened fire simultaneously. The alien ship, caught in a crossfire that no defensive system could possibly handle, began breaking apart under the sustained bombardment. War Commander. The subcommander called out as explosions blossomed throughout their ship. Hull integrity is failing. We need to abandon ship. Throktal looked around at his bridge, at the loyal officers who had followed him into this disaster, and made his final command decision. Signal the human fleet. Request terms for surrender. The response came within seconds, Admiral Chen's voice carrying across space with absolute authority. Korthak command ship. This is Admiral Chen. You attacked a diplomatic vessel. You threatened innocent civilians. You had multiple opportunities to withdraw and chose to continue fighting. There are no terms. There is no surrender. There is only the consequence of your choices. The final Korthak destroyer, seeing the fate of its command ship, attempted to flee. It managed to clear the immediate combat zone before the thunder and lightning caught up with it. The pursuit lasted less than 10 minutes before the fleeing ship was reduced to expanding debris. In the sudden silence that followed the destruction of the last Korthak vessel, Admiral Chen's voice carried across all frequencies. This is Admiral Chen to all vessels in this system. Let the record show that on this date, a Korthak battle group attacked a diplomatic vessel flying under galactic immunity. They threatened innocent civilian lives. They chose to fight rather than withdraw when given the opportunity. The Human Defense Force responded appropriately. Any questions about human resolve regarding attacks on civilians have hereby been answered permanently. The space around the crippled Harmony's edge was now filled with debris from 4 destroyed Korthak warships and 6 very much intact human destroyers. The rescue that had begun with a desperate distress call had become a demonstration of exactly why humanity had earned its fearsome reputation throughout the galaxy. But for Admiral Chen and her crews, the real work was just beginning. They had a damaged ship to repair and 47 grateful civilians to get safely home. The Harmony's edge drifted silent and dark against the star field, her hull scarred and breached in dozens of places. Emergency lights flickered weakly through her viewports, and streams of crystalline atmosphere continued to leak from the worst damage points despite the emergency containment fields. The Valanian diplomatic vessel looked like a creature that had barely survived a predator's attack, which, in many ways, was exactly what had happened. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, studying the damage reports that flowed across her tactical display. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency to coordinate the rescue operation, their voices subdued in the aftermath of the brief but devastating battle. Admiral, Commander Torres reported, the Warhammer and Vengeance have established defensive positions around the Valanian vessel. The Fury is conducting a sweep for any surviving Korthak life pods or escape vessels. Thunder and Lightning are analyzing the debris field for intelligence value. Chen nodded absently, her attention focused on the stream of data coming from the damaged diplomatic ship. The Valanians were still alive, but their situation remained critical. Atmosphere was leaking faster than their emergency systems could compensate, and their power grid was failing in cascading waves throughout the ship. "What's the status of our engineering teams?" she asked. Chief Engineer Patel reports that her teams are ready for emergency boarding operations. She estimates they can have temporary atmospheric containment in place within 2 hours, but they'll need direct access to the Valanian ship's engineering sections. And the medical situation? Dr. Harrison has trauma teams standing by. The Valanians report multiple injuries, but no immediate fatalities. However, their physiology is significantly different from ours. We'll be working from theoretical medical databases rather than practical experience. Chen turned to her communications officer. Lieutenant Kumar, establish a direct link with the Valanian captain. I want to coordinate our rescue efforts directly with her crew. Aye, Admiral. Channel open. The voice that came through the speakers was noticeably stronger than it had been during the battle, though still strained with exhaustion and pain. Admiral Chun, this is Captain Zarathek. Our entire crew wishes to express our gratitude for your actions. We had given up hope, and then you arrived like something out of legend. Captain Zarathek, we're going to get you and your people home safely. But first, we need to stabilize your ship and treat your wounded. Are you willing to allow human boarding parties aboard your vessel? There was a pause, and Chun could hear muffled conversations in the background as the Valanian captain consulted with her crew. When Zarathek spoke again, her voice carried a note of wonder. Admiral, my crew informs me that your actions during the battle were unprecedented. They say you flew attack patterns around our ship that should have been impossible. They say you trusted us enough to risk your own vessels on the assumption that we would not panic and change course unexpectedly. Captain, when someone calls for help, we help. Period. That's what humans do. But why? The question came out as almost a whisper. We are strangers to your species. We have nothing to offer in return for such sacrifice. Why would you risk 6 military vessels and thousands of human lives for 47 beings you had never met? Chen was quiet for a long moment, considering how to explain something that was so fundamental to human nature that most humans never questioned it. Around her, the bridge crew had paused in their duties, listening to a conversation that was touching on the deepest philosophical differences between species. Captain Zarathek, Chen said finally, humanity evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill us every single day. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, climate extremes. Our homeworld threw everything it had at us for millions of years. We survived because we learned to work together, to protect each other, to never abandon a member of our group, no matter how desperate the situation became. That instinct is so deeply embedded in our psychology that we literally cannot ignore a call for help, even from complete strangers. But surely there must be limits, Zarathek pressed. Surely there are circumstances where the cost becomes too high. The cost is never too high when innocent lives are at stake. That's not just military doctrine, Captain. That's who we are as a species. We'd rather die fighting impossible odds than live with the knowledge that we could have helped someone and chose not to. The channel fell silent for several moments before Zarathek spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. Admiral, you have just explained something that Valanian philosophers have debated for centuries, the nature of true moral courage. We would be honored to have your boarding parties aboard our ship. Excellent. Chief Engineer Patel will be leading the technical teams, and Dr. Harrison will handle medical assistance. Captain, I need you to understand that our people will be working under emergency protocols. They may seem intense compared to what you're used to from other species. In what way, Admiral? Chen smiled, though the Valanian captain couldn't see it. Captain, humans don't do anything halfway. When we commit to saving lives, we commit completely. My people are going to work themselves to exhaustion to get your ship operational and your crew healthy. They're going to take personal responsibility for every Valanian life aboard your vessel. Don't be alarmed if they seem obsessive about safety protocols and medical care. It's just how we're wired. 20 minutes later, the first human shuttles were docking with the Harmony's Edge. Chief Engineer Sarah Patel led a team of 30 specialists through the airlocks and into the damaged Valanian vessel, her trained eye immediately cataloging the extent of the damage as she made her way toward the engineering sections. Jesus, muttered Technician Rodriguez as they passed through a corridor lined with emergency containment fields. How are these people still breathing? Half their atmospheric systems are compromised. Valanian emergency engineering is apparently better than our intelligence files indicated, Patel replied, kneeling to examine a power coupling that had been jury-rigged with what appeared to be spare parts from a food preparation unit. Look at this improvisation. They've been keeping their life support running with kitchen equipment. Chief, called out Specialist Chun from deeper in the engineering section, you need to see this. They've got their main reactor running on what I can only describe as a prayer and determination. The control systems should have failed hours ago. Patel made her way to the main engineering station where she found herself face-to-face with a tall, blue-skinned Valanian whose crystalline features were dulled with exhaustion. The alien engineer, for he could only be an engineer, given the way he was frantically monitoring multiple systems simultaneously, looked up at her approach. "You are the human engineer?" he asked in heavily accented galactic standard. "Chief Engineer Sarah Patel, HMS Retribution." "And you are?" "Engineer Korvac Tel, Harmony's Edge." "Chief, your people have saved our lives, but I fear our ship may be beyond repair. We have been running on emergency power for over 6 hours, and our main systems are failing one by one." Patel studied the Valanian engineering displays, her trained mind quickly parsing the alien symbols and readouts. After several minutes, she looked up with the kind of grin that her own crew had learned to associate with particularly challenging technical problems. "Engineer Korvac Tel, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is that you're right. Your ship has taken damage that would normally require a full shipyard to repair. The good news is that humans specialize in making impossible repairs under impossible circumstances. We're going to have you flying home under your own power." "But how?" "Our main power grid has 17 major breaches. Our atmospheric processors are running at 12% capacity, and our navigation systems are completely offline." "Easy," Patel replied, already pulling tools from her engineering kit. "We're going to bypass the damaged sections, rig temporary power relays, install portable atmospheric processors from our own ships, and rebuild your navigation systems from spare parts. It'll take about 18 hours of continuous work, but my people don't sleep much when lives are on the line." Korvac Tel stared at the human engineer with something approaching awe. "Chief Patel, what you describe would require your entire team to work without rest for nearly a full planetary day. Surely such dedication is unreasonable for beings you had never met before today." Patel paused in her work, looking up at the Valanian with an expression of genuine confusion. "Engineer, you called for help. We answered. That means you're our responsibility until you're safely home. Nothing unreasonable about it. It's just how we do things." Meanwhile, in the medical bay of the Harmony's Edge, Dr. Lisa Harrison was discovering that Valanian physiology was both more fragile and more resilient than human medical databases had indicated. The crystalline beings appeared to be silicon-based rather than carbon-based, which meant that standard human medical treatments could potentially be lethal. "Doctor," called out Corpsman Williams from across the medical bay, "I've got a Valanian here with what appears to be internal crystalline fractures. It looks like she was thrown against a bulkhead during the attack." Harrison made her way to the injured Valanian, a young female whose normally luminous skin had taken on a dull, grayish hue that suggested significant trauma. The alien's 3 eyes tracked the human doctor's movement with obvious pain. "I am Dr. Harrison," she said gently, activating her medical scanner. "We're going to take very good care of you. Can you tell me your name?" "Lyra Venn," the patient whispered. "Doctor, are we truly safe?" The Korvac ships are gone," Harrison replied firmly. "Completely gone. You're under the protection of the Human Defense Force now, which means nothing is going to hurt you or your shipmates. Nothing. Do you understand?" The Valanian's eyes widened in something that might have been relief or amazement. "You speak as if our safety is guaranteed by natural law. As far as humans are concerned, it is. Once we take responsibility for someone's well-being, that becomes an absolute commitment." Harrison continued her examination, noting the extent of the crystalline fractures throughout the patient's torso. "Lyra Venn, I need to be honest with you. Your injuries are severe, and human medicine is designed for carbon-based physiology, not silicon-based. I'm going to have to improvise treatments based on theoretical knowledge rather than practical experience." "Doctor, will I survive?" Harrison looked down at the young Valanian with the kind of absolute determination that had carried humanity from the caves of Earth to the stars. "Lyra Venn, I've spent my entire career learning how to keep people alive under impossible circumstances. I've treated humans with radiation poisoning in the vacuum of space, performed surgery in zero gravity during combat situations, and kept trauma patients stable with nothing but field medical supplies and stubborn refusal to give up. You're not dying on my watch. That's a promise." Across the ship, Similar scenes were playing out as human rescue teams threw themselves into their work with the kind of dedication that other species found difficult to comprehend. Engineers worked around the clock to rebuild critical systems. Medical teams improvised treatments for alien physiology. Security teams established protective cordons around the damaged vessel. But perhaps the most telling moment came when Captain Zarathek, despite her own injuries, insisted on personally thanking every human who had boarded her ship. Admiral Chun, who had transferred over from the Retribution to oversee the rescue operations, found the Valanian captain in the ship's small conference room, where she had been greeting each member of the human rescue teams individually. Admiral Chun, Zarathek said as Chun entered the room, I have been speaking with your people for the past several hours, trying to understand what drives such dedication to strangers. Do you know what I have learned? What's that, Captain? Every single human I have spoken with has told me the same thing, in different words. They say that rescuing us is not an act of heroism or exceptional virtue. They say it is simply what any decent being would do under the circumstances. They genuinely cannot understand why I find their actions remarkable. Chin smiled. Captain, you're discovering one of the fundamental truths about humanity. We don't think of ourselves as particularly heroic or virtuous. We just think we're normal, and we assume that any other species would behave the same way under similar circumstances. But that is precisely what makes you remarkable, Zarathek replied. Most species in the galaxy help others when it is convenient, profitable, or strategically advantageous. Humans appear to help others simply because they need help. Such consistency of moral behavior across an entire species is unprecedented in galactic history. Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment, considering the Valanian captain's words. Finally, she shrugged with the casual gesture that humans use to dismiss profound truths as simple facts. Captain, maybe we're not as remarkable as you think. Maybe the rest of the galaxy just hasn't been properly motivated yet. 3 days after the battle, the Harmony's Edge limped into Valanian space under her own power, escorted by the human destroyer flotilla. News of the rescue had traveled faster than the ships themselves, carried by subspace communications that had turned the incident into a galactic sensation. By the time the small convoy reached the Valanian homeworld of Crystal Lys Prime, they found themselves approaching a space filled with vessels from dozens of different species, all come to witness the return of the diplomatic ship that had become the center of the galaxy's most talked-about rescue operation. Captain Zarathek stood on her repaired bridge, watching the familiar blue-green glow of her homeworld grow larger on the main view screen. The past 3 days had been a revelation that had fundamentally changed her understanding of what was possible in interspecies relations. The human rescue teams had not merely repaired her ship, they had improved it, upgrading systems with human technology that made the Harmony's Edge more capable than she had been before the attack. Captain, her communications officer reported, we're receiving priority transmissions from the Galactic Council, the Valanian High Assembly, and what appears to be every major news service in known space. They're all requesting immediate interviews about the rescue operation. Zarathek glanced toward the human liaison officer who had remained aboard during the journey home. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, a tall woman with graying hair and the kind of calm competence that seemed universal among human military personnel, had been assigned to help coordinate the diplomatic aftermath of the rescue. Commander Jackson, Zarathek said, your admiral promised that humans would see us safely home. Does that commitment extend to protecting us from overly enthusiastic journalists? Jackson's smile was quietly amused. Captain, Admiral Chin's exact words were make sure they get home safe and sound. Dealing with media harassment definitely falls under that mandate. I'll handle the communications traffic. I am curious about something, Commander. Why did Admiral Chin assign a liaison officer to accompany us? Surely your military has more pressing concerns than managing our return journey. Captain, you're thinking about this wrong. From a human perspective, our job wasn't finished when we destroyed the Korthak ships. Our job was to get you and your crew safely home. That means we're responsible for your well-being until you're actually standing on Valanian soil, not just floating in Valanian space. Zarathek studied the human officer with the same fascination that had been growing stronger throughout their journey. Commander, during these past 3 days, I have observed something remarkable about your people. You seem to approach every task no matter how minor, with complete dedication. Your engineering teams worked 18-hour shifts to repair our ship. Your medical personnel stayed awake for 36 hours straight to monitor our injured crew members. Even now, you speak of escorting us home as if it were a sacred obligation rather than a routine duty. Because it is a sacred obligation, Jackson replied matter-of-factly. Captain, when someone calls for help, they become our responsibility. That's not military doctrine. That's just human nature. We literally cannot abandon that responsibility until we're absolutely certain the people we're helping are safe. Their conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Vexori from the sensor station. Captain, I'm reading massive fleet formations throughout our home system. Valanian Defense Force vessels, Galactic Council peacekeepers, trade vessels from at least 30 different species. It appears that our return has attracted significant attention. Through the view screen, the scope of the gathering became apparent as they drew closer to Crystallis Prime. Hundreds of ships filled the space around the Valanian homeworld, from massive council dreadnoughts to tiny single-pilot newscraft, all positioned to witness what had become known throughout the galaxy as the Deathworld Rescue. Commander Jackson, Zarathek asked, is this level of attention normal when humans conduct rescue operations? Actually, Captain, this is the first time a human rescue operation has been this public. Usually when we help people, it doesn't make galactic news because it happens in human space or involves species that are already familiar with our methods. This is the first time we've responded to a distress call from a completely unknown species in full view of galactic civilization. And what do you think the consequences will be? Jackson was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Honestly, I think everything just changed. For the past 50 years, humanity has been this mysterious species that other civilizations whispered about, but rarely encountered directly. Today, the entire galaxy got to see exactly what humans do when innocent people are in danger. I suspect we're going to start getting a lot more distress calls. The Harmony's Edge was guided to a priority docking station at Crystallis Prime's main orbital facility, with the human escort fleet taking positions in a defensive formation around the station. As the ships settled into their assigned berths, Zarathek found herself amazed once again by human thoroughness. Even now, with the rescue complete and her crew safely home, the humans maintained their protective posture as if they expected additional threats to emerge. The docking bay was filled with Valanian officials, medical personnel, and what appeared to be half the diplomatic corps of known space. Ambassador Kaluriesh, the Valanian representative to the Galactic Council, was the first to greet Zarathek as she stepped off her ship. Captain Zarathek, the ambassador said, her crystalline features bright with relief and excitement. The entire galaxy has been following your story. The rescue operation has become the most discussed event in galactic politics since the formation of the Council itself. Ambassador, I would like you to meet Lieutenant Commander Jackson of the Human Defense Force. She has been our liaison during the journey home, and I believe she can provide valuable insights into human motivations and capabilities. Ambassador Kaluriesh studied the human officer with obvious curiosity. Like most galactic species, the Valanians had heard stories about humanity, but had little direct contact with them. The humans maintained a relatively small presence in galactic politics, preferring to focus on their own rapidly expanding colonial territories rather than involving themselves in the complex web of interspecies diplomacy. Commander Jackson, the ambassador said, I must confess that human actions during this rescue operation have raised many questions among galactic leaders. The level of commitment your species demonstrated is unprecedented. In what way, Ambassador? Commander, your fleet destroyed an entire Korthak battle group to rescue a single diplomatic vessel. You risked valuable military assets and potentially thousands of human lives for 47 beings you had never met, from a species you had never encountered. Most galactic civilizations would have attempted negotiation or offered to pay ransom. Very few would have committed to direct military action against superior odds. Jackson's expression was genuinely puzzled. Ambassador, they sent a distress call. What else were we supposed to do? You could have ignored it. You could have referred it to Galactic Council peacekeeping forces. You could have demanded guarantees of compensation before responding. You could have limited your response to humanitarian aid rather than military intervention. The galaxy is filled with species that would have found perfectly reasonable justifications for not getting involved. But they needed help, Jackson replied, as if this explained everything. Ambassador Kaloresh exchanged glances with Captain Zarathek, both Valanians recognizing that they were encountering a fundamental difference in psychology that would require significant study to understand fully. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Admiral Chun, who had transferred over from the Retribution to coordinate with Valanian authorities. The human admiral was accompanied by a small delegation of officers and what appeared to be a diplomatic attaché. Ambassador Kalariesh, Admiral Chun said, offering the traditional Valanian greeting gesture that she had obviously studied during the journey. I am Admiral Sarah Chun, commanding the flotilla that responded to Captain Zarathek's distress call. I understand there are some diplomatic protocols we need to address. Admiral Chun, the Valanian High Assembly has asked me to extend their deepest gratitude for your actions. We would like to arrange appropriate recognition for your fleet and crew members. Perhaps a ceremony, commemorative gifts, or territorial concessions. Chun raised a hand politely. Ambassador, with respect, we don't need recognition or rewards. We were just doing our job. Admiral, destroying an entire Korthak battle group is hardly a routine job. Ambassador, protecting innocent civilians is exactly what human military forces are for. We don't do it for recognition or territorial gain. We do it because it's right. The conversation was being recorded by news crews from throughout the galaxy, and Chin's simple statement was already being transmitted to every major population center in known space. Within hours, her words would be analyzed by political scientists, military strategists, and philosophers across dozens of different civilizations, all trying to understand what kind of species considered protecting strangers to be a basic moral obligation rather than an exceptional act of heroism. Dr. Veltar, a renowned xenopsychologist from the Centaurian Republic, had been observing the exchange from nearby. He approached the group with the excitement of a researcher who had just discovered a completely new phenomenon. Admiral Chun, he said, I am Dr. Veltar, and I study the psychology of different species for the Galactic Council. Would you be willing to answer some questions about human motivations? Your species' behavior during this rescue operation challenges several fundamental assumptions about intelligent life. What kind of assumptions? Well, for example, most species exhibit what we call tribal loyalty. They will make significant sacrifices for members of their own group, but are much more cautious about helping outsiders, especially when the cost is high and the benefit uncertain. Yet humans appear to apply the same level of commitment to complete strangers that other species reserve for close family members. Admiral Chun considered this for a moment. Doctor, I think you're overcomplicating something that's actually pretty simple. Humans learned a long time ago that we're stronger when we work together. That principle doesn't stop being true just because we're dealing with different species instead of different tribes. But, Admiral, the evolutionary pressure that creates such behavior typically requires long-term interaction and mutual dependence. How can humans extend such commitment to beings they've never encountered before? Because, Doctor, when you're facing a hostile universe, everyone who isn't actively trying to kill you is potentially on your side. It makes sense to help people when they need it, because someday you might be the one who needs help. Dr. Veltar was frantically taking notes, recognizing that he was documenting something that would revolutionize galactic understanding of human psychology. Around them, representatives from dozens of species were listening to the conversation with growing amazement. The implications of what they were hearing began to sink in across the gathered crowd. If humans really did respond to every distress call with the same level of commitment they had shown the Valanians, it meant that there was now a species in the galaxy that could be counted on for help regardless of political considerations, territorial disputes, or economic calculations. Ambassador Kalariesh stepped forward again. Admiral Chun, I believe I speak for many of the species represented here when I say that humanity has just demonstrated something the galaxy thought was impossible: truly selfless commitment to the welfare of others. This rescue operation will be remembered as the moment when galactic civilization learned that there are still species capable of pure moral courage. Admiral Chun looked around at the assembled representatives from across the galaxy, all of them staring at her with expressions of awe, curiosity, and, in some cases, calculation as they considered the implications of humanity's demonstrated reliability. "Ambassador," she said finally, "I think you're all missing the point. This wasn't about moral courage or selfless commitment. This was about 47 people who needed help, and we happened to be in a position to provide it. Any decent species would have done the same thing." "But, Admiral," Dr. Veltar interjected, "that's exactly what makes this so remarkable. You genuinely believe that what you did was normal behavior rather than exceptional virtue." Admiral Chen shrugged with the casual gesture that was already becoming famous throughout the galaxy as the ultimate expression of human practicality. "Doctor, maybe the problem isn't that humans are unusually helpful. Maybe the problem is that the rest of the galaxy has set its standards too low." As the gathering began to disperse, with representatives from various species eager to return to their governments with news of what they had witnessed, a single message began to spread through the subspace communication networks that connected galactic civilization. The humans had answered the call. The Deathworlder Armada had come in fury, destroyed the threats, and asked for nothing in return except the knowledge that innocent lives had been saved. And if the stories were true, they would do it again, and again, and again, for anyone who needed help. In the months and years that followed, that message would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy as species after species realized that there was now a force in the universe that could be counted on unconditionally. The age of human isolation was ending, and the age of human protection was about to begin. But for Admiral Chun and her crews, already preparing for the journey back to human space, it was just another successful rescue operation. After all, someone had called for help, and humans always answered.